it seems like nearly every day there are new headlines coming out of Florida. Okay, we talk about it all the time on this show as the state begins enforcing Governor Ron DeSantis' new laws, which are, we've talked about it, Stop Woke Act, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, and the overall push for parental rights in education. It's having some profound effects on what students will be taught in schools. Take a look at some of the headlines highlighting the new standards for teaching about slavery, including that enslaved people benefited from it. AP psychology being effectively banned in high schools. And now some schools are even censoring Shakespeare over fears about sexual content. So here to talk all about it, we've got the U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. Yeah. Nobody better to talk about these issues than you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Of course, happy to be here.
So, Secretary Cardona, let's just begin with the new standards when it comes to teaching about slavery. What do you think about this new curriculum and what students will be taught?
It's a joke. It's disrespectful to our students, to our educators. And let me first preface my comments by saying there are hardworking, dedicated teachers in Florida right now that are struggling, that are feeling bullied. I've been to Florida. I talked to the teachers. I've spoken to the principals. They're struggling too. So, you know, while we're seeing this bullying happening at the state level, know that the educators there are trying really hard to protect public education, because there's an attack on public education, and to honor our students and show them respect regardless of who they are. So I want to preface it by that. But the curriculum, it's a shame, but it's very, in my opinion, a very intentional attack on public schools to dismantle public schools so they could sell their voucher program. But it's also an opportunity to stay in the headlines because there's a failed campaign by the governor there. And I think part of this is trying to stay in the headlines.
Yeah, and his campaign is stinking right now. I'll use the technical term. What will it mean for students? Because I just heard about that the vast majority will not be able to take AP psychology, right? Due to lessons on sexual orientation and gender. Talk to me about that. That was a big, important course for me.
You know,
in high school.
First it was an attack on, you know, students who are gay, and then it was an attack on black curriculum. Now it's slavery, then AP. It's just, they're making a mockery of the system over there, and it's unfortunate. Students will suffer, families will suffer. However, I have to say the students are resilient, and people are seeing what's happening over there. The fact that those students, if things are taken out of the curriculum, that students in other parts of the country are experiencing, when they get to college, they're not going to have that information. They're going to be behind. So, you know, for a leader that, you know, supports smaller government, there's a micromanaging going on in Florida that I think we need to recognize. Look, we want to work with educators, with leaders from all parts of the country. Our kids need more now, not less. They need unity, not division, and that's what we're trying to do.
I just want to say it's an honor for you to be here. And as a former middle school teacher in Florida for 5 years, I taught science. So I taught sex ed for 5 years. And I can't imagine how scared I would be to broach that subject. So what protections do we have in place for teachers to make sure that they don't feel like they're going to lose their job due to having to talk about sexual content for biological and self-protective measures?
I've talked to teachers, principals, superintendents, college leaders over there that are feeling that way. They're feeling that one decision could lead to them losing their jobs. As a matter of fact, while we were reopening schools, superintendents did lose their job. It's an attack on public education. It's an attack on educators. It's taking the disrespect that we're seeing across the country in some places and really targeting it toward educators. So, you know, at the end of the day, we have an Office for Civil Rights. So if there is a belief that people are being treated hostilely for a specific reason, they can submit a request for an investigation. We're seeing a lot of things over there, but I would say stay strong. You know, teachers, at the end of the day, our kids need you now more than ever. And you know what happens. When that door closes, it's you and the students and the parents coming together around what's best for the kids. And look, I have a lot of confidence in my teachers across the country. I have a lot of confidence in public schools. I wouldn't be sitting here today as Secretary of Education if it wasn't for that public school, those public school teachers that believed in me. So to those teachers that are watching, that are scared or feeling threatened, we see you at the federal level. We're going to support you. We're going to stand up for you. We're going to push back against them, but keep doing what you're doing. Our kids need you now more than ever.
Beautifully stated. Thank you for that. Okay, so Ron DeSantis, Florida governor, he claims that he passed all of these bills in order to prevent, quote unquote, woke indoctrination, his words. In your opinion, let us know, can schools indoctrinate their students?
You know, schools that are run well have strong connections with families. And I'm not talking about parents' Bill of Rights that people put up and they don't spend a day of their term in a school. I'm talking about meaningful engagement with families, making sure that we recognize that parents are the first and most influential teachers for their children. They will always be. I used to say when I was a school principal to the parents, we're a supporting cast. That's what's happening, right? But when you have folks in high positions that are very influential injecting division intentionally, again, to disrupt public schools, you have folks who believe that that's happening. So to me, I think it's even more important now than ever for our schools and our school leaders and our teachers to communicate openly, to get parents in the classroom, let them be a part of that process. You know, there's overwhelming support for a child's classroom teacher by the parents.
Yes.
At the end of the day, in about a week or so, millions and millions of students are going to be walking into the classroom for the first day of school, and it's the relationship between the parent and the teacher that's going to make a huge difference for that child. And I have complete confidence that the educators across the country are not listening to the nonsense. They're going to focus on what they do best.
Oh, I'm meeting my child's teacher today.
Yeah.
This evening.
There you go.
Yes, thank you. Coming up on DBL, don't worry, we got Secretary Cardona. He's going to be sticking around. We're going to pick his brain about getting back to school and how students are recovering from COVID learning losses. Welcome back to DBL. We've got U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, here with us. It's that time of year. Again, we talked about this in the last block. Millions of students and teachers are either going back to school or they are getting ready as we speak. So, Secretary Cardona, let's talk a little bit about the students who are going back to school. Scores from last year show that a lot of students are struggling, and I'm sure largely has to do with the pandemic. What are your thoughts on kids who are behind, and how do we prevent them, or at least get them up to speed?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The pandemic made worse what was already there that we weren't really paying attention to.
Right.
Because 2019 data before the pandemic was nothing to write home about. We've had gaps in our country in achievement based on race and place ever since we've been collecting data. 20, 30-point gaps. And we've normalized them as a country.
30 points.
Yeah, and we've normalized that as a country. So the pandemic made them worse. So we really need to make sure we don't become complacent with those data. Our reading and math scores across the country, we're much better than that. So we have a plan called Raise the Bar, where we're very clear. It's one thing to just hand out dollars, and we did. We handed out $130 billion within the first 3 or 4 months of me being secretary. The president pushed really hard for the American Rescue Plan, and only half of Congress voted for it, but I'm glad we were able to get it through. For all students to have interventions, to have reading recovery supports, math instruction, after-school programs, tutoring. So we're rolling that out now in our Raise the Bar plan because our students deserve more. They deserve more. We should be leading the world, and we're not. And we have a plan to get there.
Is raising the bar, because my question is for the students and how they feel. Are we setting them up to fail, right? Expecting them to come up from behind. Is that what this plan, sort of just a little bit extra push?
Yeah. Well, if we do more of the same and we have different expectations, we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah, right.
So we shouldn't be doing more of the same. Our schools should be doing more. There's more resources than ever before. And we're continuing to fight for more resources so that our schools get the support that they need. So with additional resources, we should have higher expectations.
Yeah.
You know, our students should be competing internationally, should be winning. Our students should have opportunities to be multilingual and engage anywhere in the world at high levels. You know, I have confidence in our system. I have confidence in our students and in our country. And we have a plan to raise the bar, to make sure we're providing academic supports, mental health supports, and then college and career pathways for our students that they don't have now. We're excited about that work.
That's great. That's great.
Well, I'm sorry, Erica.
Oh, no. I just want to ask this question with a certain degree of caution, because I understand that the most vulnerable schools, the most vulnerable children also were the most vulnerable during COVID, and so were their families. So when we talk about, in hindsight, looking back, if it was the right decision to close schools during COVID, given the losses that we had, I also want to account for the actual grave nature of what was happening health-wise as well. But in terms of the decisions that were made during COVID, are there any things that we look back and think that could have been done differently?
You know, I appreciate that question. That's a real question that people have. Should we have closed schools? Should we have kept them open during that year? And let me talk as a father whose wife and a husband whose wife goes to school, in a school every day with thousands of students. I was on those phone calls every single day. I was the commissioner of education in Connecticut. I was on the phone calls with the governor, with the health director, hearing about what's happening in New York, where they didn't have enough refrigerators to hold the bodies.
Right.
I was on those calls where teachers in Connecticut were dying and nurses were dying. We didn't have the information we have now. We didn't have that information. We didn't have vaccines. We didn't have tests. We were kind of walking blindly into this. So it's always easier to Monday morning quarterback, but when you have the data and when the buck stops with you, you have to make a decision that can put your own family and the family of others in risk. You take that very seriously. You follow the health experts, right? Now, like with anything, could we have done things a little bit differently? I'm sure in retrospect, we have lessons learned. It took too long to connect our students. It took too long for us to feed some of our students that were suffering from hunger during that time. And keep in mind, where I was in the Northeast, New York was an epicenter.
Yeah.
So maybe in different parts of the country it was a little bit different, but at the end of the day, protecting lives was the priority.
I agree.
And we needed to make the decisions we made. But don't forget, one administration shut down the country, one administration reopened
it up
Right.
again. That's exactly.
When I became Secretary of Education, only 46% of our schools in the country were fully open. Only 46%. Within 9 months, we had over 97% of our schools fully open. We wanted schools open safely, and that's what we did through the American Rescue Plan and through guidance from our department. So at the end of the day, it's easy to look back and say, no, we protected lives. How many lives would we be losing if we didn't do what we did? But we have to intervene, recover, and raise the bar so that our students can make up and go further than where we were, even in 2019.
I have to ask this. I'm being told to wrap, but as a parent, I have to ask this. School safety. We've had 23 school shootings. Last year, it's actually this year, but I think of the last school season. That's January to June. We still have 5 months to go. You take out 3 months for summer, 23 school shootings. What are we going to do to keep our kids safe?
Yeah. Again, as an educator, as a father, nothing is more important than that, right? So the president did pushed and passed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which provided dollars for schools for more mental health supports, make sure our school climates are safe, and also provide the mental health supports that our students and staff need. But we also had gun safety legislation passed. We need to be honest. We need to think about this as parents, work together in a bipartisan fashion to get it done. Our kids need to be safe.
Amen to that.
Thank you.
Secretary Cardona, we appreciate you. Thank you for answering all of our questions. And then also, please scan this QR code with your phone's camera, and it will bring you to a page with a ton of resources to help students on their road to success this year. Thank you again
Awesome.
for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raising the bar.